With the blessing of frost essence, Bian Jano actually broke through to Epsilon. When Shangi took out the frost essence, he felt a bit guilty, afraid that the experienced Bian Jano would spot some flaw. Unexpectedly, Bian Jano just glanced at the box and directly accepted it. Shangi immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Bian Jano took out the frost essence and looked at it carefully, murmuring, "At this point, it seems this is the only way." Wu Di eagerly came forward and shouted, "Let me go first, boss." The others behind him also echoed, "We'll go together." Everyone knew that the frost essence might have side effects. They were friends who would die for each other, ready to face any danger together. At that moment, Bian Jano shook his head and said, "No, it's enough if I use it alone." Bian Jano didn't feel that he owed Shangi a favor because of the frost essence. Instead, he felt that he had taken on the unknown risks associated with the frost essence, and everyone should thank him, including Shangi. Bian Jano pressed the frost essence to his forehead without hesitation, and his head suddenly flashed with blue light. Shangi revealed a profound smile. His goal was finally achieved. From a distance, Jing Tian saw this scene and was instantly ecstatic. He had never even dared to imagine Bian Jano would use the frost essence. He knew Bian Jano's life was short, whether from being bitten by zombies or dying from overexertion. Thus, Bian Jano's unresolvable power would soon belong to Yuan Kia. Then, Yuan Kia would become a true Epsilon-level mutant, the strongest known 5th level among humans, bringing them one step closer to their dream of ruling the world. After absorbing the frost essence, Bian Jano glowed with a golden radiance, like a blazing flame. He took off his glasses and smiled contentedly. "It's been a long time since I've seen the world with my own eyes." At that moment, he felt in excellent condition, as if he had endless power inside him. At this moment, Bian Jano was no longer a Delta-level guardian. He had officially broken through to the Epsilon level. The frost essence indeed enhanced his abilities, but also expanded his flaws. A few seconds later, Bian Jano suddenly coughed violently, and a trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Wu Di and the others shouted nervously, "Boss, are you alright?" Bian Jano, enduring the pain, waved his hand gently and said to everyone, "I'm fine, just close your eyes." Everyone obediently closed their eyes, but Shangi opened the dimensional gate, thinking, "I want to see for myself how strong Epsilon's Bian Jano really is." Just as the zombie horde was about to engulf them, Bian Jano activated extinction, instantly enveloping the entire area in golden light and turning the zombie horde into ash. Shangi couldn't help but swallow his saliva, thinking, the power of Epsilon is indeed terrifying. But why doesn't Bian Jano retract it? Is he burning himself out to eliminate all dangers for his teammates? Shangi, looking at Bian Jano's back, felt a surge of respect. As the light of Bian Jano's extinction slowly faded, Shangi quickly pretended to close his eyes, acting as if he had seen nothing. But the next second, a hand rested on his shoulder, steady as a mountain. "Shangi, you can stop pretending. Don't think I don't know you've been watching." Shangi awkwardly chuckled and said, "It seems nothing gets past Captain Bian." As their eyes met, Shangi saw that Bian Jano's gaze was unusually cold, and his mouth even held a hint of a meaningful smile. Shangi quickly showed a sincere face. "Captain Bian, thank you for saving all of Heavenly Sea City." Bian Jano was unmoved, his right hand still resting on Shangi's shoulder, as if a force firmly suppressed him. Shangi also knew that Bian Jano's life was short, but now he was an Epsilon-level being. At this distance, it would be easy to kill him. At that moment, Bian Jano gripped Shangi's shoulder tightly and said, "Your scheming is really deep, even I fell for your trap." Shangi calmly responded, "I'm sorry, Captain Bian, this was indeed my backup plan. The situation was urgent, and I had to make this choice, or we all would have died." Shangi indeed did not lie. He and Yang Xinshin came up with 3 plans. The first was to use the snow worship sect sphere of the River South domain to make them give up their zombie army. Unfortunately, he overestimated the snow worship sect's control over the zombies. The second plan was to use the frost essence to enhance the investigation team's abilities and forcibly break through the zombie horde. The third was an escape plan to flee Heavenly Sea City before the arrival of the Deathslav. He didn't want to resort to this unless absolutely necessary, as he still held great respect for Bian Jano, an old brother. Bian Jano shook his head and said in a deep voice, "Let it be. I didn't have much time left anyway. In other words, I should actually thank you. If it weren't for your proposal, I wouldn't have been able to experience such great power in the last moments of my life." Bian Jano looked at his palm and murmured, "Epsilon is indeed terrifying. It's just a pity I won't be able to experience it anymore." After speaking, Bian Jano suddenly staggered. Seeing this, Shangi quickly supported him and said sincerely, "Captain Bian, rest assured, I will take care of all the remaining issues in Heavenly Sea City after you are gone." Bian Jano, sweating profusely and gritting his teeth, asked suspiciously, "How many more secrets are you hiding?" Before Shangi could answer, Bian Jano slipped and fell into Shangi's arms, completely silent. Xiao Honglian and others couldn't believe their eyes. Was it all over? Wu Di saw Bian Jano fall and shouted. He rushed over, snatched Bian Jano from Shangi's arms, and hysterically yelled, "Captain, wake up!" He desperately called out. Wu Di cried like a child, and the others quickly gathered around, surrounding Bian Jano's body. Except for Wu Di, no one cried. They simply placed their right hands on their chests and silently paid tribute to Bian Jano. Meanwhile, Jing Tian was overjoyed, excitedly thinking, although we lost the zombie army, as long as the bloodvine has enough nutrients, the zombie horde can be cultivated again sooner or later. After all, corpses are the least scarce resource in the apocalypse. That idiot Zhang Yi has just handed us a huge experience boost. He looked at the several leaders on the field, all of whom had used frost essence. Now, Yuan Kia possessed Bian Jano's extinction. By killing them all, his grand ambition would soon be realized. After Bian Jano's death, Bailey Changqing quietly stepped forward, his face devoid of any sorrowful emotions. With a sense of taking command in a crisis, he sternly said, "The captain has honorably sacrificed himself for the district. According to the district's rules, I will temporarily take over the captain's duties." Saying this, he crouched down, took the communication device from Bian Jano's chest, and reported the current situation to Zhu Zheng. The command center's Zhu Zheng had been monitoring the scene and immediately cancelled the launch command for the Death's Love upon hearing of Bian Jano's sacrifice. He felt a twinge of regret but consoled. As a soldier, dying on the battlefield might have been his best end. It's better than lingering painfully on a sickbed. I believe he would die without regrets. Bailey Changqing asked, "What are our next steps?" Zhu Zheng, watching the fallen Bian Jano through sky eye, sighed and said, "Bring Bian Jano's body back for burial." After ending the call, Bailey Changqing looked at Zhang Yi and the others and said, "The district has cancelled the launch plan for the Death's Love." Everyone who heard this breathed a sigh of relief. Their homeland was finally safe. Shing Tian also came over, crossed his arms in front of his chest, and recited the snow worship sect's prayer in style. In reality, everyone's mood was cheerful. Bian Jano's death did not bring too much sorrow. After so long in the apocalypse, everyone had become numb to such things. If there were any feelings, it was gratitude for his sacrifice to save Heavenly Sea City. Just then, Zhang Yi suddenly took out the dragon's roar from a different dimension, staring intently at Shing Tian in front of him. Shing Tian trembled and asked, "What are you doing, old classmate?" Zhang Yi laughed and said, "I'm after your life, of course." Saying this, Zhang Yi activated eightfold speed and opened the different dimension, thrusting forward fiercely. The adamantium-made dragon's roar was indestructible and instantly pierced through a body. Jing Tian hadn't figured out what happened when his chest was pierced by the dragon's roar. He didn't know where the blade had come from, but he soon understood. Zhang Yi, who was more than 10 meters away, seemed to stab Shing Tian, but the blade disappeared into the dimension he opened, and there was also a dimensional gate behind him. The blade had come through there. Jing Tian fell to the ground, continuously spitting blood. Xiao Honglian immediately pointed at Zhang Yi and rebuked, "What are you doing, Zhang Yi?" The others also gathered around, their eyes filled with wariness. Even though they had not gotten along with the snow worship sect in the past, they had joined forces against the zombie horde this time. It should have been a time for celebration, but Zhang Yi's sudden betrayal was truly despicable. Bailey Changqing and the others did not speak, as they had no interest in the local disputes of Heavenly Sea City. At this time, Liang Yu and others also arrived, ready for battle. The atmosphere on the scene suddenly became tense. Xing Tian, Xiao Honglian, and Wei Dinghai all looked at Zhang Yi with dissatisfaction and demanded, "Why attack without reason? If you don't give us an explanation today, this won't end." After the stabbing of Jing Tian, the priests of the snow worship sect angrily protected him behind them, while positioning themselves for a fight to the death with Zhang Yi. Enduring the intense pain, Jing Tian lifted his head and stared at Zhang Yi, saying, "Zhang Yi, I didn't expect you to be so despicable." The strike from Zhang Yi was incredibly fast. Although Jing Tian was one of the top mutants of Heavenly Sea City, he had no time to react, and his chest was already pierced. Fortunately, the strike did not damage his heart and lungs, or he might have died on the spot. At this moment, he had lost his ability to fight. Wei Dinghai frowned and looked at Zhang Yi, demanding, "Brother Zhang Yi, you must give an explanation for this, or we will not stand by idly." Although he did not care about the life or death of the snow worship sect, Zhang Yi's sudden dangerous action forced them to be on guard. It was hard to say who the next target of his blade might be. Zhang Yi, holding the dragon's roar, revealed a mocking smile and said, "Jing Tian, stop pretending at this point." Pointing the dragon's roar at Jing Tian, he said deliberately, "The real mastermind behind the zombie horde in Heavenly Sea City is your snow worship sect." Zhang Yi's words resonated powerfully, leaving everyone present in disbelief. Xiao Honglian widened her eyes, unable to believe this was true. Han Chan of the snow worship sect yelled at Zhang Yi, "Stop spouting nonsense. Our snow worship sect suffered the most casualties in this zombie horde." Xing Tian also said, "Old classmate, it's not that I don't want to help you, but everyone has seen the sacrifices made by the snow worship sect during this zombie horde. How could they possibly be the mastermind? Who would be that stupid?" At this point, Jing Tian could no longer control his expression. He had never dreamed that Zhang Yi would uncover their secret. However, he could only angrily retort, "Stop slandering us." Zhang Yi laughed and said darkly, "Whether it's slander or not, you'll know once I finish speaking. Everyone has the brains to judge for themselves, but you seem a bit nervous right now. Are you afraid that I'll expose you?" Others were also half doubtful in their hearts, but this did not stop them from continuing to listen. The members of the investigation team also watched Zhang Yi intently, as this battle had cost them their captain Bian. If they could clarify the whole affair, it would be easier to report back to the district command. Shangi spoke loudly. All of this started with frost essence. Frost essence can indeed help awaken or enhance abilities, but it hides a huge conspiracy. That is, once anyone who has used frost essence dies, their abilities will be absorbed by Yuan Kia. Thus, Yuan Kia, in order to enhance her own abilities, does not care about the life or death of the snow worship sect. She spares no effort to create turmoil with the aim of letting more people die. Moreover, the dead can be turned into a zombie army, a completely obedient undead army that is her real trump card. Ordinary followers are just a burden to her. Her goal is to select potential people, help them awaken, then let them die, so she can take their abilities for herself. This intelligence was too shocking, and everyone found it hard to believe. In pain, Jing Xian pointed at Zhang Yi and cursed. This is complete nonsense. If we really had such capabilities, why would we have been suppressed by your major powers in the past? You have no substantial evidence, just guesses, and you attacked me based on them. I think you're the real mastermind. From the beginning to the end, your team has not suffered any losses. You are the most suspicious. Zhang Yi calmly said, behind your cathedral, there is a building with a huge blood vine. That's what you used to create the zombie army. If you have nothing to hide, dare you let everyone go and see? Just dig up the blood vine, and everything will be clear. After Zhang Yi suggested this, everyone nodded in agreement with the approach. Jing Xian's heart sank, and gritting his teeth, he said, what if you find nothing? Then wouldn't I have been stabbed by you for no reason? Zhang Yi spread his hands and said, if it's really proving you're innocent, you can come after me anytime. Jing Xian was furious, but he had no way to deal with Zhang Yi, as everyone present began to support Zhang Yi's suggestion. At this time, Han Chang shouted from behind, we of the Snow Worship sect have nothing to fear. Let's check it out. If it turns out not to be as you say, I'll be the first to tear you apart. Just then, Jing Xian interrupted Han Chang, whispering, we can't let them check. We absolutely cannot let them get close to the blood vine. Bailey Changqing was startled by this and thought, could there really be some conspiracy? He stared intently at Zhang Yi and said, the blood vine is the foundation of our Snow Worship sect's survival. What if he is using the inspection of the blood vine as a pretext to try to seize it? Han Chang suddenly realized and cursed, Zhang Yi, you despicable little man, I almost fell for your trick. Since you were the first to make a move, we will fight you to the end. Seeing that everyone's emotions were ignited, Jing Xian shouted to his priests, everyone, attack together. Let them know that our Snow Worship sect is not to be trifled with. A dozen priests immediately yelled and charged at Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi sneered, come on, all of you, the worthless fish and shrimp of the Snow Worship sect. He didn't take these people seriously at all. Suddenly, Zhang Yi covered his right eye and said to Liang Yu and the others, save your energy. I can handle this alone. As he lowered his right hand, a blue light flickered in his right pupil, and the space in front of him where he gazed instantly distorted, and an invisible, powerful force began tearing at the bodies of the priests from all angles of three-dimensional space. In just over 2 seconds, several priests at the forefront were instantly torn apart, turning into a bloody mist. Han Chang, who was usually the bravest, immediately went weak at the knees, and Bailey Changqing's jaw nearly dropped. This is a pupil technique. Xiao Honglian and others were dumbfounded, only then realizing how ridiculous it was to have been enemies with Zhang Yi. The notion that he only attacks from a distance and stores things, not good at close combat, was all false. Just then, Chun Lei suddenly pointed in the distance and shouted, boss, that Jing guy is trying to escape. Looking closely, Jing Yixian was indeed seizing the moment while his priests charged to find an opportunity to turn and run. With his telekinetic abilities, Jing Yixian could make his body fly very fast. Zhang Yi told the others, Jing Yixian must be trying to go back and inform Yuan Kia. We must attack Yuan Kia before he gets there, otherwise, once she is prepared, we are all in danger. Bailey Changqing was still half-doubting and said, these are your local disputes. Do you think I would believe you so easily? Zhang Yi turned and took out the snow vehicle, saying, trust me, you won't suffer any losses. True or false, you'll know once you see for yourself. You are all elites of the River South domain. Surely you won't be fooled by a few words? After saying this, Zhang Yi and a few others got into the vehicle. Bailey Changqing hesitated for a moment, thinking, Captain Bian died in Heavenly Sea City, and there must be an explanation for this, or else it would be hard to report back to the district. Then he ordered, follow them. Xiao Honglian, along with Shing Tian and Wei Dinghai, also had similar thoughts. The zombie horde had caused them such great losses, they couldn't just let it go. Thus, everyone followed Zhang Yi toward the Snow Worship sect. At this moment, Yuan Kia was praying in the church as usual. Suddenly, she opened her eyes wide as an extremely powerful ability entered her body. After feeling it carefully, Yuan Kia was ecstatic inside. This is actually Bian Jano's ability, Extinction. This is a powerful force I've never experienced before. But the next moment, she frowned, thinking, how could he die? In the entire Heavenly Sea City, who could kill him? He also represented the River South domain, and if his death drew the attention of the River South domain, Heavenly Sea City would inevitably be in peril. Yuan Kia faintly felt that the situation was already somewhat out of control. Just then, a figure swiftly flew toward the Snow Worship sect camp. Jing Yixian, dragging his heavily wounded body, finally made it back to the Snow Worship sect. Although Zhang Yi's strike had not hit a vital point, it had pierced through his chest. Shing Tian had to return to inform Yuan Kia and have her prepare countermeasures in advance. He kept telling himself, it doesn't matter if I die, Yuan Kia must survive. Shing Tian arrived in front of the church. The mutants on guard were startled by his injuries and were about to help him, but were frightened off by his fierce glare, as if he were saying, these annoying ants, get out of my way. Shing Tian pushed open the church doors. Yuan Kia also sensed something was amiss and turned around sharply, only to find Shing Tian grievously injured. Seeing his beloved, Shing Tian let out a large breath and collapsed to the ground. If it weren't for his determination, he might have died on the way. Yuan Kia quickly embraced him and tried to heal him with her abilities. However, when Shing Tian woke up, he interrupted her, weakly saying, my injuries are too severe. Trying to save me would cost you too much energy. Don't waste your abilities on me. Danger is coming soon, and everything about us has been exposed. They will kill you. You must survive for our ideals. With that, Shing Tian died in Yuan Kia's arms. To die in the arms of his beloved might not have been a regret for Shing Tian, but rather a form of happiness. For Yuan Kia, his death was not without value. At least his telekinetic abilities returned to her. Soon after, Shangi and his group arrived in front of the building housing the Bloodvine. They knew Yuan Kia was now on guard, and Shangi had no intention of attacking rashly. After all, he had no idea how many abilities Yuan Kia possessed or how powerful she really was. An ambush was no longer realistic. Looking at the slightly eerie building, Shangi said leisurely to everyone, come with me, I'll prove it to you. The truth is inside here. Just as they were about to enter, a mutant guard stopped them, saying, this is a forbidden area of the Snow Worship sect. You cannot enter without permission. But before he could finish, Kongsheng suddenly appeared in front of him, grabbed his neck, and slammed him to the ground the next second, also shouting, enough of your nonsense. Afterward, Shangi and his group walked straight into the building. They had actually seen the inside of the building before, but this time it was daytime, so the scene appeared even clearer and more shocking. Xiao Holian couldn't help asking, where's the evidence you spoke of? The things hanging on the vines, they had secretly taken away for research, but aside from finding bodies drained of nutrients, they hadn't discovered anything else unusual. Shangi turned around and said, everyone here has secretly researched these things, right? That means the guards here aren't as strict as we imagined, almost as if they're letting us investigate. If there really were some major secrets, their guards wouldn't be so lax. Soon, they arrived in front of the main body of the Bloodvine. Shangi said indifferently, from what we can see, zombies like to live in dark, damp places underground, likely related to the virus controlling the zombies. Now, there's probably no place in Heavenly Sea City that fits this environment better than here, only this place. Saying this, Shangi pointed to the base of the Bloodvine, saying, the environment under here should be perfectly suitable for the virus to thrive. Hearing this, Bailey Chongqing frowned, stepped forward, and punched the ground. With a dull thud, the ground instantly shattered, sending large chunks of concrete and dirt flying, making everyone step back. As the dust settled, everyone hurried forward. The next scene left everyone dumbfounded. Countless zombies were densely connected to the roots of the Bloodvine, like peanuts bearing fruit, and those fruits were actually bodies, including armored zombies and many zombie kings, some of which had already completed their transformation. Xiao Holian cursed, damn Snow Worship sect, it turns out all this was your doing. Furious, not just her, everyone there was filled with anger. Bailey Chongqing shouted, it seems we've been played like fools by the Snow Worship sect, and it cost our captain Bian his life. Since they dared to start this, don't blame us for finishing it. Bailey Chongqing immediately ordered, kill every one of the Snow Worship sect's people. A chilling intent began to permeate the air, and the investigation team's anger reached its peak. Every face clouded with fury. The death of Bian Jano was a huge blow to them, and now that they discovered the people who killed their captain were right beside them, they couldn't bear the feeling of being fooled. This was exactly what Zhang Yi wanted to see. Now all three major powers and the investigation team saw the Snow Worship sect as a common enemy. Although Yuan Kia had absorbed so many abilities, her strength was incalculable, but she couldn't possibly be strong enough to withstand the combined force of everyone present. If she really had that kind of power, she would no longer need to worry about the face of the river South Domain. However, the death of Bian Jano was something Zhang Yi hadn't anticipated. How strong Yuan Kia could become after absorbing the Epsilon level ability of extinction, Zhang Yi also had no idea. At this moment, Bailey Chongqing, carrying a huge knight's lance, walked out and instructed Yi Jikong, this root of all evil is now your responsibility. Yi Jikong instantly understood and nodded. Don't worry, I guarantee I'll completely destroy it. Bailey Chongqing walked out of the abandoned building with large, confident strides, and the others, including members of the major powers, followed without hesitation. Zhang Yi silently followed them, deliberately slowing his pace and glancing back at Yi Jikong. Yi Jikong approached the Bloodvine, placing his hand on its trunk. The next second, a golden light flashed, and then an object resembling an octopus appeared on the Bloodvine. Zhang Yi thought to himself, so he's a release-type ability user. It seems to be that kind of ability that condenses energy for a timed explosion. After they left the abandoned building, a loud boom came from behind them. Soon after, Yi Jikong emerged from the dust, and it was then that people saw that the entire building had collapsed. The priests of the snow worship sect, hearing the noise, rushed over, but facing these ferocious top-tier mutants, they dared not approach carelessly. As they headed toward the church, some disciples of the snow worship sect could only block the door and said, "If you want to see our leader, I can notify her first." Bailey Chongqing had no time for talk. He bent forward and charged, multiple afterimages appearing in the air. After several loud bangs, those people turned into dust and disappeared on the spot. The speed was so fast, even Zhang Yi didn't see it clearly. Behind him, Liang Yu reminded Zhang Yi, "This guy is really strong, at least equivalent to 3 Ling Fengs, or even more." In the past, in Zhang Yi's eyes, Ling Feng was almost the epitome of a perfect warrior, whether in terms of speed, strength, or agility, all were nearly perfect. But now, this view was completely shattered. Facing the thick church doors, the next second he released a huge orb of light. Wu Di stepped forward and blasted directly at the door, shattering it instantly. Upon entering the church, they saw Yuan Kongya sitting on the steps, cradling the dead Jingyixian. Seeing Yuan Kongya, Wu Di's eyes erupted with intense hatred. To him, Bian Jano had always been like a father, and now with his father's killer before him, he immediately used his ultimate move. Around him, hundreds of orbs of light appeared simultaneously, and the next second he shouted, "Die!" The orbs flew out densely, bombarding Yuan Kongya like a sudden storm. Facing Wu Di's full-powered floating cannon, Yuan Kongya made no attempt to dodge. She slowly stood up, and within 2 meters around her, an invisible barrier appeared, the floating cannon unable to breach her telekinetic wall. Zhang Yi warned, "She possesses at least dozens of abilities. Everyone must be careful." Hearing this, Xiao Honglian was enveloped in a crimson flame, shouting angrily, "Even if she's powerful, I don't believe she can overcome the combined force of all of us." She quickly spread out, spewing a huge fire dragon towards Yuan Kongya. At the same time, Shing Tian, riding a demon hound, charged forward with his Shing Tian army. For a moment, various abilities rained down on Yuan Kongya like a fierce storm. However, no matter the form of attack, they could not penetrate Yuan Kongya's telekinetic barrier. Zhang Yi suddenly thought, "At this distance, I wonder if my divine power can ignore her telekinetic barrier." Just then, Yuan Kongya slowly rose into the air, surrounded by a golden glow. The disciples of the snow worship sect, seeing this, excitedly raised their arms and shouted, "The snow god has descended." Yuan Kongya hovered in the air, looking down on everyone like a deity. Sensing something was amiss, Zhang Yi silently retreated behind the others. Gradually, Yuan Kongya's expression turned ferocious, and she coldly said, "You ants dare to oppose me? I am the emissary of the gods on earth, and all acts of blasphemy against divine authority will be met with divine punishment." With that, she slowly spread her arms. "Let me punish you on behalf of the gods." As the energy gathered between her palms, cracks began appearing on the ground, as if an earthquake were unfolding. Zhang Yi immediately activated 8-fold speed, moving as far away from Yuan Kongya as possible. Then, large boulders rose from the ground and, under Yuan Kongya's control, hurtled towards the people like meteors. Those who couldn't dodge in time were continuously struck by the boulders. The apocalyptic power on display shocked everyone present. Zhang Yi couldn't help but exclaim, "She has already reached the Epsilon level." At this moment, Zhang Yi had to rally everyone's strength to protect as many survivors as possible. If the others were killed by Yuan Kongya, he would be unable to stand alone. Thinking this, Zhang Yi shouted, "Everyone, get behind me." Then, he opened a huge dimensional gate, into which the flying boulders disappeared. However, this wave of attack still killed many mutants. Yuan Kongya called out, "Come to my side." The abilities of those who had just died began to converge and absorb into her. Yuan Kongya lowered her head to stare at Zhang Yi and said softly, "I really want your spatial power." She opened her right hand like a deity, and the boulders beneath the ground slowly rose again. Zhang Yi was shocked. His dimensional gate could only defend in one direction. If she manipulated the boulders to attack from multiple angles, he couldn't defend against them. Yuan Kongya's telekinetic control was simply too strong. Although this was Jingyixian's ability, it had far surpassed Jingyixian's level. Is everyone really going to end like this today? Shing Tian activated the Shing Tian core ability, which boosted everyone's combat power. Xiao Honglian used her strongest attack ability, Flame Dragon's Breath, and Wei Dinghai used his killer move, Ice Storm. Zhang Yi continued to use the dimensional gate to defend against the rocks. Just then, the sniper of the investigation team, Qi Guangming, said solemnly, "Just defending against these rocks is useless. We need to deal with Yuan Kongya to end this." Qi Guangming raised a specially made sniper rifle, and a golden streak shot out from the barrel. Yuan Kongya initially dismissed the bullet, but the next second she frowned. The bullet had penetrated her telekinetic barrier. However, the bullet stopped just less than 2 centimeters from her. The confident Qi Guangming suddenly became shocked. "This is impossible. She has too many abilities. She can even block my bullet." Curious, Zhang Yi asked, "What kind of gun is that? It can penetrate her telekinetic barrier?" He had seen with his own eyes that even the floating cannon, fired by Wu Di using all his mental power, had no effect on the telekinetic barrier. Qi Guangming glanced at him and said, "This is an origin bullet, specifically designed to combat mutants, developed by scientists scientists from the River South Domain. Hearing this, Shangi couldn't help but remark, it truly lives up to the name of the River South Domain. Just half a year into the apocalypse, and they've already developed a bullet to combat mutants. At that moment, Shangi wondered, I wonder if this kind of bullet could penetrate my dimensional gate, but after thinking about it, he felt it was unlikely, as the dimensional gate was not a defensive ability like telekinesis, but a dimensional portal that swaps spaces. Just then, Bailey Changqing shouted, we can't let her control the pace any longer. From now on, everyone follow my lead. He stared intently at Yuan Kia and said in a deep voice, even though she has powerful abilities, she's only just over 20 years old and definitely lacks experience in combat. This means she's likely to show weaknesses. Bailey Changqing told Qi Guangming, keep shooting her with the origin bullets. I just noticed that the storm of rocks slows down when she defends against the origin bullets. Clearly, she can't multitask, so distract her with the origin bullets while I go in for close combat to find her weaknesses. Everyone else, continue attacking from a distance to divert her attention. As for the final move, Bailey Changqing turned to look at Zhang Yi and said, our attack should provide you with a chance to use your divine power. As soon as she shows a weakness, hit her with a fatal blow from your divine power. If necessary, you can even kill me along with her. This statement made everyone present deeply respect Bailey Changqing, but for the investigation team, such risks were nothing new. They had long been resigned to death. Everyone quickly acted according to the plan. Yuan Kia knew she couldn't take the special bullet lightly, so she controlled a large stone slab to shield herself. Although the origin bullet had special effects against mutants, its physical power was rather average, and a stone slab was enough to block it. Just then, Bailey Changqing, like black lightning, suddenly appeared behind her, wielding his huge knight's lance and stabbing at Yuan Kia. Sensing danger, Yuan Kia immediately strengthened the telekinetic barrier behind her. Even though Bailey Changqing used 100% of his power, he still couldn't break through, but this provided Zhang Yi with a perfect opportunity. She had strengthened her defenses at the back. The front must now be the weak point. Zhang Yi didn't hesitate to act. His eyes suddenly flashed blue, instantly distorting the space in front of him. Yuan Kia was shocked. Zhang Yi can also use pupil techniques? Just then, Yuan Kia's eyes burst with a dazzling white light, and she said fiercely, let's see whose pupil technique and Bian Jano's extinction are more powerful. Immediately following, a loud explosion erupted from the collision of abilities, blasting everyone away in an instant. The orb violently flung Bailey Changqing hundreds of meters away. This top-tier enhanced mutant, as tough as steel, actually vomited blood and stared at Yuan Kia with a grave expression, saying, she has actually mastered the captain's extinction in such a short time. This power, I know it all too well. It's the unique pupil technique of Captain Bian. Extinction. Nearby, Xiao Honglian also exclaimed, she has even absorbed extinction. How can we fight this? Everyone has seen how powerful Bian Jano was, a terrifying ability that could annihilate hundreds of thousands of zombies in a glance. How could we possibly be her match? At this moment, Bailey Changqing stood up and shouted, everyone, don't lose heart. Indeed, that move was Captain Bian's extinction, but it's clear she's not proficient with it yet. Everyone, stay alert. We still have a chance to defeat her, otherwise, we will all die. Bailey Changqing was very sure of this, because if it had been Bian Jano using this power just now, he would not have been able to stand at all. At this time, Yuan Kia also felt a trace of fear. Divine power had matched her newly acquired extinction, something she hadn't anticipated. Meanwhile, Zhang Yi pulled out a large meat bun from his spatial dimension and began devouring it in front of her. For Zhang Yi, the consumption of divine power was enormous. Without timely energy replenishment, he could only release his abilities 3 or 4 more times. Fortunately, as a space-type ability user, he could replenish his powers at any time. Endurance battles were his strength. Seeing this, Yuan Kia was infuriated. She had always considered herself an emissary of the divine realm, and now, mere mortals dared to challenge her. She decided to kill everyone. She rose into the air again, and 2 powerful storms began to spin in her palms, sweeping up countless boulders and ice, forming a massive tornado. Chun-Lei, witnessing this, broke into a cold sweat and yelled at Zhang Yi, boss, maybe we should escape now, while we still can. But Zhang Yi rebuked, there is no turning back after loosing the arrow. He stared coldly at Yuan Kia and said, do you think we could still escape now? If it were just me running, there would be no problem, but you guys would definitely die. The battle was inevitable. Zhang Yi said, as long as we win, we can ensure peace for Heavenly Sea City in the future. If we lose, that is a problem for after we lose. Saying this, his eyes once again flashed blue, readying his divine power. Yuan Kia sensed this power and laughed, still trying to target me? I won't give you a second chance. As she spoke, her figure began to blur, as if numerous afterimages were overlapping, making it impossible for Zhang Yi to pinpoint her exact location. However, Zhang Yi's side had the advantage of numbers. Bailey Changqing had mentioned before that Yuan Kia's practical combat experience was almost nil. Even if she was powerful, they still had a great chance. As Zhang Yi's divine power restrained her, the storm significantly weakened, boosting everyone's morale. Shing Tian maximized his abilities. Qi Guangming aimed at Yuan Kia's head, continuously firing origin bullets. Bailey Changqing was close at hand, looking for an opportunity to deliver a fatal blow which left Yuan Kongya somewhat overwhelmed. Seeing this, Yuan Kongya shouted, "You annoying ants, do you really think a few of you can oppose me? Dream on." Her voice coldly echoed in the sky. As she waved her hands, several more terrifying storms swept in all directions, seemingly about to engulf everyone in a single strike. Her primary targets were Zhang Yi and Qi Guangming. Zhang Yi also realized this. As the storm approached, Zhang Yi quickly opened 2 gates and said to Uncle Yu and others behind him, "Follow me." In the next second, they disappeared through the spatial gate. The moment they left, their previous spot was smashed to bits by the storm's boulders. Qi Guangming didn't have Zhang Yi's escape skills, and just as the storm was about to engulf him, suddenly, a huge knight's lance tore through the storm. Bailey Changqing rushed to Qi Guangming's side, then picked him up and charged out of the storm with him. Even Yuan Kongya couldn't help but admire, worthy of being Bian Jano's deputy, such strong defense. But no matter how strong you are, it's in vain. How many times can you withstand my attacks? Her energy seemed inexhaustible, continuously launching attacks at everyone. Just then, Zhang Yi suddenly appeared in front of her like a ghost, unexpectedly unleashing divine power. At the critical moment, Yuan Kongya could only instinctively counter with extinction. Her unpracticed extinction was nearly evenly matched with Zhang Yi's divine power, mutually eroding each other and producing a peculiar explosion in the air. Zhang Yi took a deep breath and said to the few behind him, "Quickly leave this place. You can't help much in this level of battle. The tactic of overwhelming numbers is now pointless. Only a few of us can affect Yuan Kongya. The others staying here are just live targets." Liang Yu wanted to argue something, but seeing Zhang Yi's serious expression, she stopped herself. She had to leave with Uncle Yu and Chun Lei aboard the flower. In the center of the battlefield, Xiao Honglian, Wei Dinghai, Shing Tian, and the members of the investigation team became the main force. Yuan Kongya, having mastered telekinesis, floated above, looking down on everyone. Wu Di, having recovered, filled with a vengeful glare, continuously fired floating cannons at Yuan Kongya like a torrential rain. With Shing Tian's abilities enhancing them, everyone tried their best to wear down Yuan Kongya, distracting her attention. Everyone also understood that Zhang Yi's divine power was the key to victory. Yuan Kongya, of course, realized this too, and felt extremely irritated by the attacks of dozens of mutants. Although these attacks were trivial for her, she dared not leave any defensive gaps. If hit by Zhang Yi's divine power, she could suffer significant damage. Yuan Kongya had no patience to continue at this rate and decided to finish the battle quickly. Her eyes once again emitted a golden light, shining in the sky like a dazzling sun. She maximized the power of extinction, a force capable of annihilating everything, reminding everyone of the scene where Bian Jun was single-handedly killed hundreds of thousands of zombies. Bailey Changqing was shocked by the power of this strike. She has reached Bian Jun's level. He quickly picked up Wu Di and Qi Guangming and ran towards Zhang Yi. Xiao Honglian and others also realized the danger and made the same move. Zhang Yi opened his right hand, expanding the dimensional gate to its fullest extent. A massive dimensional gate unfolded in front of him. Those who hadn't managed to reach Zhang Yi's dimensional gate in time were instantly turned to ash by the light of extinction. After Zhang Yi opened the dimensional gate to its maximum extent to block the extinction, everyone finally breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, extinction was a wide-ranging attack, unlike divine power, which concentrated power in one spot, making it difficult for it to threaten the dimensional gate. However, that strike had already wiped out almost all the elite mutants left on the field, leaving only a few leaders of the forces and members of the investigation team. It was then discovered that Wei Dinghai's right arm had been disintegrated by extinction. He could only ice his severed limb to stop the bleeding. Everyone looked at Yuan Kongya both angrily and helplessly, wondering, is an Epsilon really unbeatable? Yuan Kongya, seeing this, laughed triumphantly. Your ability is indeed strong, but I have absorbed the abilities of more than 50 people, including Bian Junwu's. Do you think you have a chance to defeat me? She said menacingly, pointing at Zhang Yi. I really want your space-type ability too. Zhang Yi indeed felt some trepidation, thinking, are we really out of options against her today? He said solemnly to the few behind him, it's come to this. Everyone must bring out their last reserves of strength, or we're all dead. Wu Di gritted his teeth and shouted, isn't that obvious? But at that moment, he also thought, even if we risk our lives, do we really have a chance to win? Zhang Yi continued, if we all fight together, maybe we can still see a sliver of hope, otherwise, we are dead for sure. Zhang Yi shouted. Yuan Kongya's attack naturally wouldn't wait for Zhang Yi and his group to finish talking. A new wave of attacks caught everyone off guard. This time, the attack came from beneath the ground. Suddenly, the ground below exploded, and hundreds of thorny vines surged out, stabbing towards everyone. Zhang Yi decisively activated his spatial abilities, opting for evasion. Perhaps inspired by Zhang Yi's words, everyone now had a resolve born of desperation. Just then, Wu Di's body suddenly burst with tremendous power, his psychic energy enveloping him and lifting him into the air. This scene made Bailey Changqing look on with sorrow. He knew Wu Di was burning his life force, a reckless act that might cost him his life. Wu Di's transformation caught Yuan Kongya's attention, his actions briefly reaching the threshold of Epsilon. Laughing maniacally at Yuan Kia, Wu Di yelled, "You little wench, die for grandpa." Speaking of which, Wu Di released countless orbs towards Yuan Kia. The power this time was incomparable to before. While releasing the orbs, he raised his left hand and an enormous floating cannon formed above his head, which he then swung ferociously towards Yuan Kia. At that moment, Shangi was also not idle. While Wu Di launched a frontal attack, he quietly moved to Yuan Kia's back, locked on, and directly activated divine power. This time, even Yuan Kia felt the threat of death, instinctively releasing extinction again. The terrifying powers intertwined and collided in the air, fiercely intense. The explosion of astonishing energy shocked Uncle Yu and Liang Yu, who were watching from a distance. They couldn't help but wonder, is this finally over? However, when the dust settled, Yuan Kia seemed still largely unharmed, just wearing a look of fatigue. At this time, Yuan Kia also realized that although they couldn't defeat her, her energy would eventually be exhausted. Meanwhile, Wu Di's condition rapidly deteriorated, aging visibly within seconds. The next second, like a powerless plane, he began to rapidly fall. Bailey Changqing saw this, leapt up, and caught him. On the other hand, Zhang Yi, although using divine power several times had depleted him greatly, he kept stuffing food into his mouth whenever there was a break, continuously replenishing his energy. As a space-type ability user, he was least afraid of a war of attrition. However, the situation was not optimistic. Wu Di was now completely incapacitated, certainly unable to continue fighting. Xiao Honglian was spitting blood violently, and Wei Dinghai, after losing an arm, was almost disabled. Now, it seemed that only Bailey Changqing and Zhang Yi still had the strength to fight. In this moment of despair, Yuan Kia's voice boomed from above like a deity. "Stop your futile struggle. It only increases your pain. You'd be better off letting me end it quickly." At this moment, Yuan Kia seemed extremely confident, as if victory was firmly within her grasp. Yuan Kia was relishing this feeling of immense power. The sensation of controlling and destroying everything was simply too wonderful. Then Zhang Yi said in a deep voice, "It seems this is your limit after all, although it's a bit less than what I expected, but you've done almost enough." Hearing this, Xiao Honglian was shocked, thinking, Zhang Yi is suddenly talking big. Does he still have some tricks up his sleeve? Although they acknowledged that Zhang Yi's divine power could effectively restrain Yuan Kia, if they were to lose their support and it came down to a one-on-one fight, Zhang Yi would probably be killed by Yuan Kia in 2 seconds. But Zhang Yi continued, "You injured folks better leave here now. From now on, I'm taking over this battlefield." Bailey Changqing looked bewildered and said, "Zhang Yi, there's a time and place for showing off. We're at this stage now. Stop joking." Zhang Yi laughed and replied sideways, "I don't have time to joke with you. Everyone should leave immediately." As soon as the words fell, Wei Dinghai and Xiao Honglian immediately turned and ran, saying as they went, "Then we'll leave this to you." At this moment, Shing Tian looked seriously at Zhang Yi and said, "Old classmate, we're leaving the last hope to you." Saying this, he concentrated all his remaining energy, enhancing Zhang Yi with it. Bailey Changqing instructed Qi Guangming to take Wu Di away, stating that he would fight alongside Zhang Yi to the end against Yuan Kia. Zhang Yi did not stop him. Though Bailey Changqing was injured, he was not seriously harmed overall. Yuan Kia watched this scene from midair, somewhat puzzled, but didn't stop the others from leaving, curious about what Zhang Yi was up to. At that moment, Bailey Changqing threw a black handgun to Zhang Yi, who frowned and said, "Isn't this Captain Bian's sidearm?" Bailey Changqing told him, "There are still about 20 origin bullets left." Zhang Yi put away the sidearm, looked up at Yuan Kia, and said, "It's time to end this." Yuan Kia laughed maniacally. "It's ridiculous. Who suddenly gave you such confidence? Do you really think you're a match for me in a one-on-one fight? It seems you still know nothing about my power." Saying this, Yuan Kia once again gathered a storm in her hands and said to Zhang Yi, "Now that I've slowly adapted to the dozens of abilities within me, I will soon finish you off and take your power as well." Bailey Changqing, using his agile movements, leaped from one huge boulder to another in an attempt to get close to Yuan Kia and launch an attack. Yuan Kia remained unflustered. She merely stretched out her right hand with a fierce look in her eyes, and a surging telekinetic force burst forth, instantly sending Bailey Changqing flying. Zhang Yi ignored Bailey Changqing and directly opened a dimensional gate to appear behind Yuan Kia. Now, Zhang Yi had become very proficient in using the double gate ability. Theoretically, within a range of 300 meters, he could move instantly, even hovering in the air. Seeing this, Yuan Kia waved her right hand, and a storm of energy, sharp like a giant sword, stabbed fiercely towards Zhang Yi. However, unexpectedly, Zhang Yi did not dodge. He opened a dimensional gate and completely absorbed the storm's energy. The next second, a second gate suddenly opened behind Yuan Kia, and the tornado she had just released came rushing back towards her. However, with just a glance, Yuan Kia made the tornado dissipate instantly. To this, Yuan Kia coldly said, "Child's play. You can catch one storm, but what about 100? The next second, almost from every direction around Zhang Yi, dense hurricanes turned into long spears, all aiming at Zhang Yi and stabbing towards him. With a loud explosion, Yuan Kia thought Zhang Yi had been blown to pieces, but the next second, Zhang Yi appeared unharmed at another location. From a distance, Xiao Honglian exclaimed in shock, shock. Zhang is too strong. It seems he has never really shown us his true power. Probably only Lian Yu and a few others understood just how strong Zhang Yi's survival ability was. Seeing Zhang Yi unscathed, Yuan Kongya was also quite surprised. Is running away all you've got? Zhang Yi smirked and made a taunting gesture. Come at me if you dare. Yuan Kongya, not one to back down, launched another fierce storm at Zhang Yi. This time, to prevent Zhang Yi from escaping, Yuan Kongya increased the attack's range. But she never expected Zhang Yi to display a new skill. He turned the dimensional gate into a dimension shield. Although only the size of a shield, it freely navigated through the storm under his agile control. Seeing this, Yuan Kongya was almost driven mad. Zhang Yi, meanwhile, kept taunting. Is that all you've got? He wasn't just passively taking hits. Whenever he had the chance, he would activate divine power to attack Yuan Kongya. Yuan Kongya, wary of the power of divine power, had to counter with extinction each time Zhang Yi used it. Everyone watching from a distance went from being skeptical at first to being utterly astonished. Xiao Honglian and Wei Dinghai were wide-eyed, hardly believing what they saw. Zhang Yi's terrifying defensive power was a far cry from when they had once thought of opposing him, now seeming utterly absurd in retrospect. At this time, Meng Xiu analyzed with a serious face. However, it's not a solution to keep dragging this out like this. Zhang Yi's attacks have no effect on her, and once Yuan Kongya gets tired, she could turn around and kill us all at any moment. Bailey Changqing said in a deep voice. Now, we have no choice but to trust Zhang Yi. Our lives are not important. After all, she is an Epsilon level mutant. If she decides to kill us, we absolutely cannot escape. After being disgusted by Zhang Yi's tactics, Yuan Kongya, in a fit of rage, decided to change her strategy. She had already used over a dozen methods against Zhang Yi, but Zhang Yi's dimensional shield and spatial maneuvers were like a bug, impossible to hit, impossible to catch. At this moment, she realized the importance of Jing Xian and couldn't help but lament. If you were still here, you would definitely help me figure out how to deal with Zhang Yi. She began to think about what Jing Xian would do in this situation. Suddenly, an idea flashed. Why not take someone Zhang Yi cares about hostage, force him to save them, and that would make him expose his weaknesses. However, when she took a closer look, she realized that Uncle Yu and the others had long since disappeared. Yuan Kongya, who had been entangled with Zhang Yi, hadn't noticed this at all. Zhang Yi didn't forget to taunt. It seems you finally learned something. Too bad it's too late. Yuan Kongya, infuriated, felt her rage reach its peak. At this time, only Xiao Honglian and a few members of the investigation team were left on the battlefield, and Yuan Kongya realized that if she chose to deal with these people now, she would be exposing her back to Zhang Yi, potentially allowing him to sneak attack. The lives of these people meant basically nothing to Zhang Yi, and wasting time on them was pointless. Yuan Kongya turned around, glaring fiercely at Zhang Yi, thinking, this Zhang Yi is like a turtle with high defense, not only with an unbreakable shell, but always wary of the snake hidden within it ready to bite you. Really annoying. She forced herself to calm down. Although she lacked combat experience, her learning ability was not weak. Soon, she figured out the characteristics of Zhang Yi's defensive abilities. It was limited in displacement. With that in mind, Yuan Kongya spread her arms wide, preparing to restrict his teleportation abilities first, then find an opportunity to break through his shell. This time, Yuan Kongya manipulated hundreds of fire dragons that soared into the sky and pounced towards Zhang Yi. This scene made Zhang Yi somewhat panicked. Although his dimensional shield and specially made combat suit could temporarily withstand high temperatures, the ground beneath him was icy. As expected, the fire dragons charged straight to the ground, and soon, thick mist began to spread, quickly obscuring Zhang Yi's sight. This forced Zhang Yi to be on alert. At this moment, he felt like he was surrounded by a steamy fog, unable to see his hands in front of him, with the temperature around him rising, as if surrounded by a steaming basket, unable to discern any direction. At this moment, the sound of water reached Zhang Yi's ears, and the ground had apparently turned into a vast lake. Under Yuan Kongya's control, the waves soared into the air, forming a wide aerial river. Zhang Yi immediately sensed unprecedented danger. His spatial teleportation ability could not dodge such a wide-ranging attack. Realizing he couldn't escape this area, Zhang Yi knew this was Yuan Kongya's attempt to cut off his mobility. At that moment, Yuan Kongya stretched out her right hand and took a deep breath. The long river instantly began to freeze. In just 2 seconds, the entire river had solidified, and Zhang Yi was firmly trapped in this frozen river. Seeing this, Yuan Kongya's lips curled into a delighted smile, laughing. Now I see how you can dodge. Just die quietly. Despite her use of the wide-ranging ice river, it still couldn't trap Zhang Yi. At the moment of the attack, Zhang Yi dived into his own dimensional space. His dimensional space was a near time-stopped blank zone, even devoid of air, but entering it for a short period was not fatal. Zhang Yi used this fact to successfully dodge Yuan Kongya's skill. Yuan Kongya couldn't believe her eyes, but Zhang Yi continued to taunt. Your idea was indeed good, but unfortunately, it doesn't work on me. At this, Yuan Kongya began to break down inside, hysterically shouting, I will tear you to pieces. Just as she was about to unleash another harsh move, a strong sense of discomfort suddenly surged in her head, even blurring her vision. Yuan Kongya instinctively supported her forehead. head. Zhang Yi noticed this detail and flashed a provocative smile, waving his finger at her. Come on then, if you can, kill me. And one more thing I forgot to tell you, that stab on Jingyi Shen, I did it, Zhang Yi said nonchalantly. Upon hearing this, Yuan Kongya's expression became fierce, and she roared at Zhang Yi viciously. Fine, then I'll let you go down and accompany him in death. While speaking, Zhang Yi didn't stop for a moment. Facing the energy balls released by Yuan Kongya, he simply sidestepped with ease. This wasn't because Yuan Kongya lacked power, but rather her practical experience was too thin. Coupled with Zhang Yi's continuous verbal provocation, she began to show clear signs of physical discomfort, feeling dizzy and nauseous as if experiencing motion sickness, especially while outputting energy crazily. Yuan Kongya started to realize that this sensation wasn't due to her emotions, nor was it a sudden illness. Holding her forehead in pain, she gritted her teeth and asked Zhang Yi, "What exactly did you do to me?" Seeing this, Zhang Yi's expression grew even more deranged, thinking to himself, as expected, the side effects have started. It seemed the side effects of Bian Jano's abilities were taking effect, a secret unknown to Yuan Kongya. Zhang Yi continued to taunt, "It looks like you haven't fully mastered the power within you. I guess this discomfort isn't caused by the spirits of those dead haunting you, is it?" Yuan Kongya rebuked. "How would you ants understand this?" Struggling with the pain, she launched a fierce attack towards Zhang Yi, hurling various powerful abilities at him wildly. However, all of this was virtually ineffective against Zhang Yi. But what was the point of this battle? Zhang Yi's strongest divine power couldn't kill Yuan Kongya, and every attack of Yuan Kongya was nearly lethal. However, the changes in Yuan Kongya's body gave Zhang Yi the answer, using the side effects of the abilities to wear down Yuan Kongya. If this plan succeeded, the Epsilon level source energy from Yuan Kongya would be his. Once he absorbed her abilities, it would be like absorbing the abilities of dozens of mutants at once, possibly elevating him to the Epsilon level. Thinking this, Zhang Yi decided to continue provoking Yuan Kongya. "I know you hate this world and want to destroy everyone, but speaking of which, you're not innocent either. If it weren't for your parents starting a cult, causing countless families to be destroyed, you wouldn't have ended up in such a predicament." Hearing these words, Yuan Kongya's pupils abruptly contracted, that part of her history being the darkest shadow in her heart. Angry believers vented all their hatred on her, and Jingyi Shen, who tried to save her, was trampled underfoot. Recalling these unbearable memories, Yuan Kongya suddenly hugged her head and let out a painful cry. At the same time, a tremendous power, like a storm, erupted around her. Under the continuous verbal provocations from Zhang Yi, Yuan Kongya's vision started to blur, even seeing double images of Zhang Yi. A strong sense of crisis enveloped her. "Zhang Yi, you scoundrel, what exactly have you done to me?" Yet Zhang Yi showed an annoyingly smug expression, responding, "You guess, why should I tell you?" Yuan Kongya glared at Zhang Yi hatefully, now convinced that Zhang Yi must have used some ability at some point that caused abnormalities in her body. Thinking this, Yuan Kongya spread her arms wide, her body suddenly radiating a vast golden light. This was her ability blessing, which could heal all diseases and injuries in a body. However, the situation turned out unexpectedly. As soon as she activated the ability, her symptoms worsened, even causing severe pain in her chest. Zhang Yi seized the moment, aiming for her life. Now, divine power activated again, shooting straight towards Yuan Kongya. Yuan Kongya reacted quickly, blocking the attack once more with extinction, but her physical condition deteriorated even more. The onlookers watched this scene, baffled. What means did Zhang Yi use? Even an Epsilon level mutant appeared to show symptoms of poisoning. Was there really an ability that could poison someone? Bailey Changqing, seeing Yuan Kongya coughing, suddenly realized it's the captain's ability. Not just him, every member of the investigation team widened their eyes in shock. Meng Xiu pondered and murmured. After she absorbed Captain Bian's abilities, she also inherited the side effects of his powers. At this realization, she suddenly exclaimed in astonishment, could all of this have been orchestrated by Zhang Yi? No one would believe this is just a coincidence. Lying weakly in his sleeping bag, Wu Di cursed, "I told you Zhang Yi was no good, even calculating us into his plans." But at this moment, Bailey Changqing analyzed calmly, given the circumstances at the time, that might have been our only chance of rescue. I think the captain also understood all of this. To save us, he was willing to risk his own life to be manipulated by Zhang Yi. Thinking this, Bailey Changqing widened his eyes. This guy managed to set up such a grand scheme, turning even us and Captain Bian into his pawns. That's really something. Wu Di angrily swore, "Something my ass. Once I recover, I'm definitely going to settle the score with him." Meng Xiu consoled, "You better rest for now. Let's deal with Yuan Kongya first, otherwise all of us might end up paying the ultimate price." Everyone present knew that only if Zhang Yi defeated Yuan Kongya would they have a chance to survive. However, seeing Yuan Kongya's rapidly deteriorating condition, everyone felt a surge of excitement. At this moment, Zhang Yi was continuously replenishing his energy. In this war of attrition, Zhang Yi's chances of winning were very high, but he was also conserving his strength, not wanting to end up in a situation where both parties are severely injured, allowing someone else to benefit from their losses. After all, Zhang Yi's real target was Yuan Kongya's Epsilon level source. Zhang Yi, in order to preserve his special ability, changed his offensive method method to the origin bullet. The origin bullet, to ordinary people or objects, has the same power as a regular bullet, but its destructive power is unimaginable once it encounters a mutant. Unexpectedly, Yuan Kia chose to withstand the origin bullet with her body, completely unwilling to dodge voluntarily. In her view, dodging meant shifting to defense, and being too proud, she was naturally unwilling to admit this fact. However, as the origin bullet attacks continued, her psychic powers could not block them. Activating psychic powers also consumed her special abilities, and Bian Jano's backlash from using his abilities became more pronounced. This put her in a dilemma. Using her abilities made her increasingly weak, while not using them would lead to her death by origin bullet. Many mutants were watching eagerly, waiting for her downfall. Was she really going to lose? As Yuan Kia pondered, Shangi continued to taunt. Why aren't you fighting back? Are you ready to surrender after such a short fight? However, if you are willing to cripple your abilities and surrender to me, I might consider sparing your life. Stimulated by these words, what met Shangi was a fierce barrage of ice spikes, but they were all swallowed by Shangi's dimensional gate. As Shangi replenished his energy, he taunted further. It seems you still haven't given up. Yuan Kia's expression twisted, and she angrily questioned Shangi. What ability did you use against me? When did you attack me? Shangi didn't want to waste any more words, firing the origin bullet at Yuan Kia. Go to hell. At the critical moment, Yuan Kia stretched out her hands forward, and a huge wall of ice appeared in front of her, blocking the attack. However, using her abilities caused her head to throb painfully as if it were being pierced with needles. She knew she couldn't continue the fight against Shangi. It was better to preserve her life for future opportunities. She had to leave now, recover, and find another chance to eliminate everyone here. Thinking this, Yuan Kia quickly activated her psychic powers and flew away. Shangi was not surprised by this. He had predicted all possible choices Yuan Kia could make. Today, no matter what, Yuan Kia had to die by his hand. Even Jesus couldn't save her. Shangi then accelerated to 8 times speed in pursuit. Others also realized that Shangi was about to win. Bailey Changqing watched Yuan Kia in the sky, his expression solemn. A critically wounded Epsilon level mutant. If he could obtain her origin, he might be able to ascend directly to Epsilon. Not just him, everyone's gaze turned fervent. At this moment, Wei Dinghai made a decisive decision. Having lost an arm, his strength greatly reduced, and his former status likely unsustainable, he decided to gamble it all. His eyes started to storm with blue, and frost armor quickly covered his body. He leaped into the air, tracing a stunning arc, and in the next second, he became a sharp attack. Countless ice spikes targeted Yuan Kia. Sensing the danger, she swung her right hand powerfully, and with a loud boom, Wei Dinghai's frost armor shattered like glass, and he was brutally smashed into the ground. Immediately after, an ice spike pierced his chest. This scene awakened everyone. The single move that instantly killed Wei Dinghai made everyone realize that even a wounded Yuan Kia was not someone they could contend with. Shangi continued to chase Yuan Kia at a leisurely pace, but as she left, he dropped a remark. If anyone wants to compete for Yuan Kia's origin, feel free to try. The people around, who had been restless, instantly sobered up. They knew that even if Yuan Kia were defeated, the origin of Epsilon wasn't theirs to claim. Bailey Changqing said with regret, I didn't expect that in the end, Shangi would be the biggest winner. Everyone knew that if Shangi successfully absorbed Yuan Kia's origin, he might directly ascend to Epsilon level. By then, he would become the most powerful mutant in the entire River South domain. Thinking this, Bailey Changqing scratched his head. Captain Bian once said he wanted to recruit him to our team. Given the current situation, even if he really came, it would be as our leader. Yi Jikong said with a melancholic tone, it always feels like everything was orchestrated by him, and we were all used by him. Captain Bian could have lived longer. Bailey Changqing gave a powerless sneer. There's no such thing as using or not using someone. Who can blame him for being more skilled? Bailey Changqing sighed. Everyone understands that without Zhang Yi, Captain Bian would have died soon anyway. Dying on the battlefield is better than dying in a sickbed. Moreover, being able to shine one last time before dying might not be a bad thing for him. Meanwhile, Yuan Kia was still fleeing rapidly. It's not that she couldn't defeat Zhang Yi, but she really couldn't afford to keep fighting. At this moment, she urgently needed a place to recuperate, but as soon as she landed to catch her breath, Zhang Yi forced her to fight again with the origin bullet. Each use of her abilities to block it aggravated her internal injuries. Whenever Yuan Kia was extremely angry and ready to fight desperately, Zhang Yi would activate the dimensional gate and flee without looking back. The enemy advances, I retreat. The enemy retreats, I advance. This began to break Yuan Kia's spirit. In contrast, Zhang Yi continuously replenished his energy whenever he had a break. He even injected himself with a stimulant. For that Epsilon level origin, this eagle-wearing operation must be victorious. In the blizzard, the fleeing Yuan Kia had already lost her direction. Thus, she ran until the next day and, by instinct, found a supermarket hidden underground. After fighting continuously for so long, Yuan Kia was extremely hungry. Just as she was about to grab some food to eat, a rocket accurately struck the place. With a loud boom, Yuan Kia staggered out of the smoke and dust. She turned back, and far away, Zhang Yi was holding a rocket launcher with a come and hit me expression. Yuan Kia erupted in anger again. As Yuan Kia raised her right hand, a powerful force surged towards Shangi. Shangi opened dimensional gates in front and behind him, and her storm couldn't reach him. Shangi continued indifferently. I think you should just surrender. Everyone around you is dead. Your parents, Shing Tian, and the tens of thousands of followers of the snow worship sect. Even if you get everything, you are still alone. What's the point? Everyone died because of you. Don't you feel guilty? I think perhaps the person who should die the most is yourself. Yuan Kia listened to Zhangyi's words silently, her face expressionless. She could only turn around and continue to flee into the distance. Zhangyi, however, didn't care and leisurely followed behind her. At this moment, she was like a headless fly, running solely on belief. In these 3 days, she hadn't eaten anything, filled with unparalleled despair. If Zhangyi were stronger than her, even being killed wouldn't be so painful, but unfortunately, she encountered such an unshakable plaster, making her nauseously helpless. She dragged her weary body to a snow mountain, looking at a distant withered tree, and couldn't help thinking, Jing Xian, how good it would be if you were still alive. Zhangyi was about 1,000 meters behind her. Compared to Yuan Kia, he was almost fully charged, with stimulants and plenty of food, confident enough to wear Yuan Kia down to death. Seeing Yuan Kia's condition, Zhangyi knew victory was near. Yuan Kia was too tired after 3 days and nights without sleep, but whenever she was about to fall asleep, Zhangyi's origin bullet would aim at her head. She tried hard to keep herself awake, even clasping her hands together, praying for God to save her, but received no response. Her spirit began to collapse, crying out, God, save me. Why don't you guide me? Everything I've done was to create a pure world free of filth. Shing Tian, tell me what to do. In a daze, many familiar figures appeared before her eyes. Her parents were calling her not far away. Kia, come with mom and dad to heaven. The next moment, the face in front of her turned into Shing Tian, who anxiously shouted at Yuan Kia, Kia, wake up, wake up. Seeing Shing Tian's face, Yuan Kia couldn't hold on any longer. Tired and hungry, she leaned into Shing Tian's arms, murmuring, maybe it's time to give up. All the people who love me are dead. Dying would reunite me with them. Little did she know, what she was leaning on was actually just a withered tree. Yuan Kia murmured, I'm so hungry, I'm so sleepy, and then slowly closed her eyes. From a distance, Zhangyi took the opportunity to shoot at her, but her remaining psychic power still blocked the hit. Seeing no reaction from Yuan Kia, Zhangyi emptied his magazine. Several origin bullets later, Yuan Kia was directly cut in half. This scene looked somewhat brutal, but facing such a powerful mutant, Zhangyi had no choice but to do this, and he couldn't blow up the head directly, as that might affect the origin. Zhangyi walked up to Yuan Kia's body, and next, by absorbing her origin, he would become an immensely powerful mutant. Yet he also smiled somewhat regretfully, saying, I'm not that interested in becoming more powerful, but to survive in this apocalypse, I have no choice but to do this. Zhangyi gradually moved his palm closer to Yuan Kia's head, and the next second, an indescribable immense power surged into his body along his arm, like a raging river roaring inside him. He closed his eyes, keenly feeling the changes brought about by this power. At this moment, he felt stronger than ever before, achieving epic enhancements in every aspect. Soon after, Zhangyi slowly opened his palm, and instantly, a black electric light condensed in the center of his hand. He controlled this power, the black matter behaving like flames and lightning, rapidly growing in his palm. Soon, Zhangyi felt somewhat unable to control this power and lifted his hand to release it. With a swoosh, the black power instantly disappeared into the mountainside. The next second, a mass of dark matter exploded from that spot. When the black sphere disappeared, a huge circular hole was left in the low mountain, as if it had been erased by some force. Zhangyi murmured in shock, it's actually void power. He looked at his palm and pondered, this must be an upgraded version of divine power, with more terrifying lethality and power. If combined with my dual gates, there would be no one in this world I couldn't kill. Zhangyi's heart began to swell infinitely, but this complacent feeling was quickly suppressed by him. He constantly reminded himself, there are too many strong people in this world. I must not be too arrogant, otherwise, I might end up like Yuan Kia, ultimately leading to my own destruction. Bian Jano had also said that there is someone in the capital region who can take lives from miles away, proving that this world is still full of threats. I must always remain cautious. However, with his current strength, even if he encountered a stronger mutant, self-preservation would not be a problem. Zhangyi dialed Uncle Yu's phone and told him that Yuan Kia had been taken care of. Uncle Yu was on speakerphone, and upon hearing this, everyone present breathed a sigh of relief. After 4 days and 3 nights of intense pursuit, Zhangyi had focused all his energy on Yuan Kia, and now everything was settled. Uncle Yu told Zhangyi, Wei Dinghai is dead, and his deputy Chen Jingwan took the remnants back to Morning Dew Base. Xiao Holian also returned to Radiant Prosperity Base, and the investigation team temporarily went to Emerald Waterside Base to recuperate. That guy named Wu Di was seriously injured and seemed barely alive. We are all waiting for you at the shelter now. Upon hearing this, Zhangyi immediately drove to the shelter. After arriving at the shelter, everyone wanted to hug him, but Zhangyi only picked up flour. He refused everyone else. He waved his hand at the crowd and smiled. I just want to rest now. Let's talk about everything after I wake up. Shangi passed by the crowd and went straight to his room. He locked the door and threw himself onto the bed. Now, all he wanted was to get a good sleep.